For today's thrift store challenge, we will be talking about none other than Magnolia and Hearth in Hand. We're gonna go on their website, go to the store, get loads of inspiration, and then we're gonna head over to the thrift store and see what we can come up with for a whole lot less. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Starting off with, I would say one of the easier things to find at any thrift store is brass. If you love Magnolia and Hearth in Hand, thrifting your brass can be a really great way to save and decorate your space if you're on a budget. For example, both of these bud vases are originally from our house, so not from Magnolia, but they were $21 a piece and I was able to snag them both for just $6. Other really easy small items you can find are brass and glass boxes. Now these can be a small fortune on sites like Magnolia. This can be really helpful, especially when we're talking about the Goodwill outlet, because all glass items are just 49 cents per pound, so you're able to get a really good deal on a quality item. If you're looking to add more depth and character into your decorating, adding specifically patinaed brass is really the trick here. Now you can buy this at every big box store because it is so trendy right now, or you can go to the thrift store and find actually patinaed pieces. Some of you may remember this beautiful patinaed brass oil lamp that I found before. Now usually I keep this inside, but I think for summer what I'd like to do is instead remove the glass component, and I've never used it as an oil lamp, but I would love to use it as a really beautiful all metal solar lantern for any summer parties or hosting we might do. Most recently at the Hartville thrift shop, I came across both of these sconces. They were in perfect condition. They don't look like they've ever been used, and they were just $3. Taking these previously thrifted lampshades, and we're just going to combine these two pieces together. Now, one thing I do want to point out is these are not hardwired into the wall. Now, when we eventually do go to build, we can make all of those changes, but it's honestly never been easier to hack your lighting if you're renting or if you just don't know how to install things like this. So in the description box and also on the screen here is a link to the exact light bulbs that I like to use in situations like this where nothing is hardwired, but you want to make it look like it is. And last but not least, don't forget about the power of paint. So let's say you find a metal piece that kind of resembles something you might find on Magnolia. The things for me were the ball feet, the braided trim, and the fluting detail. But of course, the color and the pattern was just not quite right. So just a couple coats of some inexpensive spray paint and you've got yourself a faux patinaed brass planter, but on a budget. Which of course now brings us to planters, and as tempting as these faux potted plants and these terracotta planters might be, I just think we can find a little bit better at the thrift store for a much more affordable price. For example, I found this perfectly aged terracotta planter, had just the right amount of detail that you would see on things like Magnolia and McGee & Co., but for a fraction of the cost. Another thing to think about, a lot of times if you are at the bins and let's say you really like one piece, like if you love these florals because they remind you of these florals that you can find from Magnolia, you just simply remove them. They're just happy that you're taking anything. And because these stems are so lightweight, they were pennies on the dollar and they will look great for any early spring decorating situation. And if you're not new to this channel, you know my feelings, we'll call them, about these faux arrangements from Target. And even going the high-end route, like going to Pottery Barn, this whole eucalyptus and vase situation costs over $200. And you can just go to the Goodwill bins, spend pennies on some eucalyptus, maybe grab some other florals that you find in the bins you want to add to it, grab a vase or a planter that you really like the shape of, even if you're not crazy about the color. Again, easiest thing to change. So I just did a mix of different acrylic paints that I mixed with baking soda, apply the paint using a damp paper towel. If you want to be like a super DIYer, you can prime it first, but I just do so many coats that you don't really need a primer anyway. Go ahead and just pop in those florals and you can have a completely custom, really beautiful, similar high-end look for just about $5. While we're on the subject of florals, I know it can be tempting to always feel like you need a new wreath every year for that specific season, but don't forget about just repurposing what you already have. I had previously bought this boxwood wreath from mac.bin. To give it a different life for this spring season, I just decided to add these faux baby's breath that I found at the bins, as well as just drying out 2 packs of baby's breath from the grocery store, cutting those down and sticking them in there as well. And what's nice is in doing this, I didn't have to go out and buy a whole new wreath. Now I have to store a whole new wreath. I just used something that I already added a few different things to it that are not permanent. So when spring is over and I want to maybe make this a more summer inspired wreath, I just take those off. But it's a really great way to just utilize things that you already have if you're on a budget and tight on space. Moving along now to the wood pieces that you can find both through Hearth and Hand and Magnolia. Such beautiful pieces to add to any space, but you can also find similar or even the exact same items that you can find at Target through the Hearth and Hand line at the thrift store. For example, I found this riser here for just $6, and then I had 35% off, as well as this wood bowl in the bins, so pennies on the dollar. Both of these pieces at Target, if I wanted to buy them together, would be almost $60, and you just don't have to spend that if you shop secondhand. Something that I think Magnolia does really well is incorporating primitive wood into the design. I think it creates a lot of balance, and while you can come across primitive pieces at the thrift store, it's just easier to find at antique stores, especially depending on the booth. Some of you may remember when I found this table here. Now, the only thing that I didn't really like about it was that the top was like a box almost, and I wanted it to be a flat surface just to make it easier to style. So just don't be afraid to change things to make things work better for your space. So I just decided to remove that shelf there, and instead of keeping it as the bottom of that box, we're just going to make this now the top of our table. It's already measured and cut. Making this a super straightforward project, just needed to wedge it in the top there. Of course, you want to pre-drill some holes so your wood does not snap. When I did this, of course, I got a splinter, so I just decided to take it outside, give it a just scuff sanding so everything was nice and smooth. To remove any of the dust, just took my shop vac. If you don't have a shop vac, just use your vacuum or even like a tack cloth to remove any of that sawdust there. Now, initially I have had this dresser here in my entryway, and I do like it because it provides me some storage, especially in the winter for gloves and hats and things like that. But hopefully we won't be needing those things too much longer here in Ohio, so I really wanted to add this primitive table in the entryway. Tables like this from Magnolia, McGee & Co, Shop Amber Interiors can be a small fortune, and you can find this stuff at your local mom and pop antique shops, tweak it a little bit, and save a ton in the process. Another thing to really consider is just the power of repurposing. If you really love the checkered pieces from Magnolia and maybe you find this, yes, it's engraved checkered board, you can cut it down to fit your space and fit your needs and use it in a completely different way. One of my favorite pieces was this wood box easel from this last drop, but again, you can find so many wood boxes that just need a little bit of TLC from the thrift store. So I believe this box here specifically was used to store maybe some silverware at one point. Now this box has definitely been through a little bit of a beating, but that doesn't mean that we can't spend an hour of our time and give it new life today. Everything, and I mean everything, starts off with a really great disinfectant, and then we're removing everything that's inside this box before taking out to the garage to give it a good sanding. Typically, I would say if you're just going to do the color trick like I'm showing here, you could skip this step, but because some of the carvings were so deep, I did need to sand down the entire thing. With the wood pieces, more just like a dusting, I wouldn't do 2 coats because you still want some of the grain to show through, so that way when you do go over it with the gel wax, it sets in and it still looks like a really beautiful custom stain color. Added a little bit of hardware, and of course it's not identical to the one from Hearth and Hand, but I think it's still really beautiful in a budget-friendly way. Another thing I just quickly want to mention, if you ever find these at the thrift store and you love Magnolia, Hearth and Hand, and that vibe, make sure you pick these up. These are just little chest pieces, but you can use these in so many different ways to get a more similar look to something you'll find on Magnolia. So for example, you could just cut these down and now you have a small little finial knob like I'm showing here on this box You could also flip them upside down and use them as like little ball feet on different projects, little planters, little trays, things like that. You could even stack some across, drill small holes, which I'm gonna show you guys next week, and then just add a dowel in between to kind of make like a guard for a shelf. And this is a really inexpensive way to get a closer look to something you'll find on Magnolia. Not really a DIY, but something I definitely want to make sure that I include in all of these videos is to make sure that you guys are checking your book section. It's not going to be every time that you find stacks upon stacks of really great coffee table books, but every now and then you can at least walk away with 2 to 3 that you can add to your existing book collection to really add depth and character into your space. Now, of course, we're talking about spring, so I like to bring in the gardening books, the baseball books, golf books, tennis books, all of those kinds of things you can find at Pottery Barn. You can find them at Anthropologie, but they're gonna be a lot more expensive than at the thrift store. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about textiles. Whenever I'm doing my research for these videos, I like to look for themes. A consistent theme in terms of the textiles that she uses through both lines is definitely a linear pattern. And you can definitely find this at the thrift store. So of course, this is your plaids, your buffalo checks, your ticking. So if you really love Magnolia and Hearth and Hand, you should be incorporating some linear patterned fabric in some capacity in your space. So most recently I came across a set of 3 of these at the Goodwill bins. So we're talking maybe $2 for all 3 of these. Of course, wash, dry, steam. Just do your best to disinfect everything to the level that you feel comfortable with. Added inserts from home that I already had, and it's the perfect amount of pattern to my bedding without it feeling overwhelming in a budget-friendly way. With all that being said, that really wraps it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments which project or find was your favorite this week, and I will see you back here next Sunday. Bye for now.